Breaking tonight, Canada may walk away from a $27 billion U.S. fighter jet deal.
Sweden is offering its jets, Canadian jobs, and real independence from unpredictable American pressure. Welcome to Canada Next.
Breaking tonight, Canada just signaled it might walk away from a $27 billion American fighter jet contract, and the country offering the alternative? Sweden. With their king, their queen, and 10,000 Canadian jobs on the table. Dear viewers, what you're watching unfold right now isn't just about military procurement. This is about whether Canada continues tying its security to a neighbor whose president openly jokes about annexing us, or whether we pivot to a partnership that treats us as equals. And the choice has never been clearer. Let me tell you what just happened that changes everything. November 18th, 2025. Ottawa. Industry Minister Melanie Joly, standing in front of reporters, made the most direct statement any Canadian official has made about our fighter jet contract. And what she said should make Lockheed Martin very, very nervous. Speaking about the government's approach to defense procurement, Joly stated that Ottawa wants to use military procurement to get more value for Canadians, and she explicitly mentioned examining Sweden's Gripen offer as part of that review. Translation: Canada is seriously considering dumping the American F-35 and switching to Sweden's Gripen E fighter jet. And the timing of this statement? Absolutely calculated, because at that exact moment, King Carl XVI Gustaf and Queen Sylvia of Sweden were in Ottawa on an official state visit. Not a coincidence. This is diplomacy at its finest. Sweden sent royalty to seal a deal that could reshape North American defense relationships for the next 40 years. But before we dive into why this matters, let me paint you the picture of what Canada currently faces with our F-35 commitment. We've already paid for approximately 16 F-35 jets out of a planned 88. That's a massive investment. The total contract? $27 billion, with Lockheed Martin, an American defense contractor, for jets that will be built in America, maintained in America, upgraded in America, using American intellectual property that we'll never own. And here's where it gets interesting. One of Mark Carney's first decisions after winning the Liberal leadership and becoming Prime Minister was instructing Defense Minister Bill Blair to review this contract, to examine whether there were better options for Canadian taxpayers and Canadian sovereignty. That review has been ongoing for months. Quiet, professional, thorough. Until last week, when Sweden made an offer that Canada simply cannot ignore. Let me break down what Sweden is putting on the table, because the contrast with America's offer is absolutely stunning. First, jobs. Saab, the Swedish aerospace company, says its proposal could support up to 10,000 Canadian jobs. Not temporary positions, not vague promises. According to company estimates and recent reports, these would be direct aerospace manufacturing positions maintained over roughly 40 years. High-skilled, high-wage careers building and maintaining fighter jets on Canadian soil. The F-35 contract offers virtually no Canadian manufacturing. The jets come pre-built from American factories. Our role is simply to write the check and take delivery. Second, manufacturing location. Sweden will build the Gripen E fighters in Canada. They've already identified partnerships with Canadian aerospace companies, including IMP Aerospace and Defense, CAE, GE, and Clearfield Canada. They're establishing a Gripen Center in Montreal to manage the entire Canadian fleet, a cyber resilience center in Toronto, a sensor center in Vancouver, an aerospace R&D center in Montreal. Every single one of these facilities means Canadian expertise, Canadian innovation, Canadian control over our own military assets. Compare that with the F-35, built in Fort Worth, Texas, maintained in American facilities, upgraded according to American timelines and American priorities. Third, and this is crucial, intellectual property transfer. Sweden is offering to share the technology that makes the Gripen work. The designs, the software, the upgrade pathways. They want Canada to become a full partner in the jet's evolution, capable of innovating and improving the platform independently. The F-35, all intellectual property remains with Lockheed Martin. Every software update, every capability enhancement, every technical modification requires American approval and American contractors. Canada would own the jets, but not the knowledge that makes them function. Think about that for a moment. We'd be flying fighter jets where another country controls the source code, where our pilots depend on American technicians for basic maintenance, where our military readiness is tied to supply chains we don't control. And here's where the concerns become even more pointed. There's been widespread speculation about advanced U.S. systems, like the F-35 potentially having remote limitations built into their software. Some defense commentators have raised questions about whether Washington could theoretically restrict allies' capabilities through software updates and support infrastructure. U.S. officials publicly deny the existence of any literal kill switch, and there's no concrete proof such a function exists. But the mere fact that these questions circulate tells you something important about how dependent partners would be on American technological goodwill. Look, maybe it's real, maybe it's not. But here's what matters. Right now, thousands of Canadians are asking themselves, do we really want to fly jets where we're completely dependent on another country's tech, where our military capability could theoretically be limited by someone else's software? That question alone should tell you something. So let's zoom out for a second. What's actually happening in the Canada-US relationship right now? While Sweden sends their king and queen to Ottawa, offering partnership and respect and economic opportunity, what's America offering? A president who repeatedly suggests Canada should become the 51st state. Who jokes about economic annexation? Who's threatened 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods? Who's made it clear he views Canada not as an ally, but as a subsidiary that needs to know its place? Sweden has never threatened to annex Canada. Sweden has never imposed punitive tariffs. Sweden has never suggested they view us as anything but a respected sovereign partner. Sweden is offering partnership. America is offering dependence. And Minister Joly's statement last week suggests that Ottawa is finally recognizing the difference. Now, I want to address something important here. There are legitimate technical questions about mixing fighter jet types in a military fleet. Can Canada effectively operate both F-35s and Gripens? Would logistics become too complicated? Would interoperability with NATO allies suffer? These are real concerns that military planners need to consider carefully, but here's what I know with absolute certainty. Whether Canada buys F-35s or Gripens or some combination of both, the money comes from Canadian taxpayers. From you, from me, from every person watching this video who pays taxes in this country. And if I'm contributing my tax dollars to a $27 billion military purchase, I want that money invested in a partnership that strengthens Canada rather than one that deepens our dependence. I want those aerospace jobs in Montreal and Toronto and Vancouver. I want Canadian engineers learning how to build and maintain and upgrade advanced fighter jets. I want the intellectual property that lets us innovate independently. I want a partner that sends their king and queen to discuss terms, rather than a neighbor whose president jokes about conquering us. The Gripen may or may not be the superior aircraft technically. I'll leave that debate to the pilots and engineers who actually fly and maintain these jets. But as a strategic choice, as a signal about Canada's place in the world, as an investment in Canadian sovereignty and economic independence, the decision seems remarkably clear. And what makes this moment so fascinating is that it's part of a much larger pattern we've been tracking on this channel. Since becoming Prime Minister, Mark Carney has systematically worked to diversify Canada's economic and security relationships away from American dependence. The UAE investment deal, the mining alliance with Australia, trade acceleration with India and Japan, infrastructure partnerships with Europe, and now, potentially, a defense relationship with Sweden that puts Canadian jobs and Canadian control at the center of the arrangement. Every single one of these moves reduces Canada's vulnerability to American pressure. Everyone creates options that didn't exist before. Trump wanted to squeeze Canada into submission. Instead, Carney is building a coalition of partnerships that makes us stronger and more independent. And the F-35 decision sits right at the heart of this strategy. Because if Canada walks away from that contract, or even significantly reduces it in favor of the Gripen, the message to Washington is unmistakable. You don't get to take Canadian business for granted anymore. You don't get to treat us as a captive market. If you want our partnership, you need to offer us something more than threats and condescension. Sweden understood this instinctively. They crafted an offer that respects Canadian priorities and Canadian dignity. They sent their highest representatives to demonstrate serious commitment. They offered substantial job creation, technology transfer, and sovereign control. They treated Canada like a valued partner rather than a subordinate. And now, Minister Joly has acknowledged publicly that Canada is seriously considering their proposal. The next few months will tell us whether this becomes a full pivot or a negotiating position to extract better terms from Lockheed Martin. Either way, the leverage has shifted. Canada has options now. Real, credible alternatives backed by a serious country offering serious commitments. that changes everything. So here's my question for you, and I genuinely want your perspective in the comments. Should Canada dump the F-35 contract entirely and go all in with Sweden? Should we split the purchase, maybe keep some F-35s for NATO interoperability, and add Gripens for sovereignty and jobs? Or should we stick with the original American contract despite everything we've discussed? This is your money, your military, your country's future relationships. What would you decide and why? Leave your thoughts in the comments section. Let's build a real conversation about this because it matters enormously for Canada's trajectory in the coming decades. And if you are the kind of person who wants to understand these pivotal moments before the mainstream media even recognizes them as pivotal, you know what this channel offers. We track the actual power shifts, the real strategic moves, the decisions that shape Canada's place in the world. Subscribe if you're not already part of this community, because what's unfolding right now between Ottawa, Washington, and Stockholm is just the beginning of a much larger realignment. Mark Carney is playing a long game, and every move reveals a little more of the strategy. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.